Colleagues, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Gleb Wyszlinski. I'm the Executive Director of the Center of Economic Strategy. We are starting our presentation and discussion of the third wave of research of the Ukrainian refugees. In my notes, it says abroad. Of course, they are abroad. Ella, I know you don't like the word refugees. Yes, I don't like it because it's not right. Okay, we will discuss that. But to simplify, we have decided to preserve this term, although we absolutely agree with Ella. So we will be presenting, technically, this is the third wave, but this is the research, which is based on the second big research survey of Ukrainians abroad that have left to a great extent, after the 24th of February 2022. Exactly this wave was conducted in December 23, January 24. In more detail, we will hear by Daria Michalishna about this event and the research in general. Like in the previous waves, they were conducted under the support of the International Renaissance Fund. We are very much thankful to them for their sustainable support for this tracking period in the martial law. The presentation is available with the link in chat. This research will be fully uploaded today in full volume. We will be finalizing it a little bit and we will upload it because too much work at the same time in many countries. Yeah, it has its own pluses and minuses, but in any case, we will finalize it today and we will send all the participants the link. This event will take place in Ukrainian with the simultaneous translation in English. We have actually two speakers who will be talking English, so please look at the menu and you can select the translation from the bottom. The plan is as follows. We will have the presentation and then we will have comments exactly to this presentation, from whom I will say later. Also, the last technical issue, please keep your questions in the Q&A. I understand there will be a lot of questions to the presentation itself. There will be comments. Possibly Daria may have the possibility to some simpler questions to reply. Otherwise, we will discuss them after that hour, which we will have for the discussion. Allow me to pass the floor to Daria Michalnishina. She is the senior economist of the Center of Economic Strategy, and at the same time, she's working to defend her thesis at the Bologna University. She has been working on all waves of this project. She is the master lady of this project. And the last technical issue, many of you have used the big data sets that we have prepared with the previous research. So we will also upload the clean data set on our website. We will need another week or two. Otherwise, we will inform you in any case, and everything is always transparent. Dasha will pass the floor to you. Many thanks. Allow me to share my screen to show you my slides. One moment. I hope you can see my screen and you can hear me. Therefore, we are ready to start. Exactly, we will be presenting the third wave of this research today. Unfortunately, as you will see in the end, once we publish the whole version, we have some data, some results, quite a lot of them. So today we will present you the most important, but with the bigger variety of results. You can also familiarize yourself once you go to our website. So let us start about how many Ukrainians are now abroad. It's important to mention today we have looked up at our evaluation and we have changed our methodology. As before, we are still using the number of crossings over the border to calculate the number of Ukrainians who are abroad. Otherwise, we were using the data of UN. Now we're using the UN data for 2022, as well as the data from the State Border Control Service for 2023. This is connected with the fact that we have noticed that in case we compare the data published on the website of United Nations with the border control and with other data, like for instance, if we look up at the figures of Poland, Slovakia, we see a huge difference, although United Nations say that they take this data from these countries. I mean, I'm talking about exactly about 2023. For 2022, this is the difference between these countries with the neighboring countries. It's not that huge. So yeah, we can use for 22 the data of the United Nations, and for 2023 the state border control data. Our current estimation that abroad we have 4.9 million of Ukrainians. Out of them, 3.3 millions left abroad from two European countries. Another 250,000 have moved via Russia. This is what we have done when we made the research, when we were asking, did you go directly to the EU or via Russia? So another 1.3 millions are still in Russia or Belarus. And we can see here the graph when people were leaving, majority left in the first months of the full-scale invasion. Also, for the better understanding of the change in the methodology, we have also shown you this table, which shows you the old evaluation for 2022 and how it has changed after we have changed the methodology. You can also notice those who have left in the direction of Europe. Also, this figure has changed, although we use the same data from the UN for 2022. And now this is connected with the fact that they themselves changed certain data that they're publishing on the website of the UN, especially when it comes to data about Moldova. There are some technical issues. I will not talk in much detail what has actually changed, but this was actually changed in any way. In any case, also went to Europe via Russia or Belarus. We didn't have that exact data. Therefore, we just took the difference with the number of border crossings to Russia, which was mentioned by Russia. And we don't have any expectation that this data is absolutely correct. 0.5 to 1.4 million. Sometimes there was the mass media publications that in Russia they published. But now, in any case, we're using the data of our research. Also, there could be certain problems with it because not that many people want to talk about it, but we can't have the perfect data that we could select. Also, regarding Russia and Belarus, the overall estimation has not changed. They published 1.5, then they went down to 1.3. So we are using the same 1.3. So our overall revaluation has changed mostly for the first two items. Also, if we look at which countries of Europe Ukrainians live now, as half a year ago, majority lives in Germany and Poland. Germany has become number one some half a year ago versus Poland. If we look at the distribution per one person in the country, on the first place, it's Estonia. Outside of Europe, it's the biggest countries is the US, Great Britain, and Canada. When we talk to the Ukrainian refugees, it's important to mention about Ukrainians with the temporary protection. We have as at the end of January 2023, about 4.3 Ukrainians have temporary protection status in the EU. Sometimes they go to Canada and they don't refuse from their protection status in Poland, or they're going to Italy and they don't cancel Poland. So this number could be a little bit overestimated. It's also important that now the majority of Ukrainians who are in Europe, they have this temporary protection. Few people talk about it, but this status is due to finish on the 4th of March 2025, and based on the EU laws, it can't be extended for more than this actually 4th of March 2025. So we have also decided to look at what could happen afterwards. and we are also proposing to use several options. I will not talk in much detail about all of them. Our most useful option is option number one, is the freedom to move and have residence on an equal footing with the EU citizens. The logic is like this. If Ukraine is planning to access the EU earlier or later, we will get this freedom to live and to reside. So we're suggesting to make this earlier, and this will also allow Ukrainians who have left to come back to Ukraine and then go back. So they will not have any fear that they're afraid to go to Ukraine because I will be deprived of some social payments. Therefore, Ukrainians will still be connected with Ukraine in a much more, in a bigger extent. But other options are also possible. Maybe the European Union will not make a final decision what to do once this temporary protection status expires. Then we go to the data of our research. As Gleb said, this is the third wave of research. Apologies, somebody didn't switch off the microphone. Allow me to continue. So this was the third wave of research, which was done in December 23, January 24. We have asked thousands of Ukrainians abroad. Also, we have used some quotas. If we look at the overall social demographic distribution, we can see that majority of Ukrainians abroad are women, which is not surprising at all. Age-wise, it's 35-44, as well as children. Although if we look at the children, that the share of underage children decreased compared to our previous research. It was 51, now it's 38, the share of minors. And as I said, Germany and Poland are the biggest countries. If we look at the regions of the Ukraine, these are the southern and eastern regions of Ukraine, which is also very logical because they suffered the most from the war. Also, we see the phenomenon that the share of Soviet Ukrainian refugees who had higher or incomplete higher education in January 2024 remains at 70%. And refugees assess their economic situation before the full-scale invasion much better than the national figures. And we also understand that people with high education, they're more prone to leave if we look at the overall population before the war. And if we look at the property status of the refugees, we see that more than half of Ukrainians in general could afford only food, but among refugees, this figure was even less than 15%. So they were much more well-to-do. Continuing about Ukrainian refugees, we see from the time that they have left, first of all, they had deteriorated their economic status, but since then, their economic status has started to improve, and now it is almost at the pre-war level, although it is really slightly less. We have also see a bigger number of share Ukrainians who are employed. It grew from May 2023 from 39 to 45%, and now more people have higher income that they had before the war because the salaries in the European Union are higher than in Ukraine, but taking into account that the property status was quite bad in the beginning, it also says that people are improving their economic condition. We have also looked at how Ukrainians are integrating in their countries of stay. This social integration does take place, and now people like it more abroad versus their life in Ukraine. We are also bringing this graph that shows the comparison of the share of people who like it much more in Ukraine versus much more in abroad, with various waves. The previous wave that was in April, May last year, 42% said that they like it more in Ukraine. Now it's only 27 of such people. And that is more or less the same situation in all countries that we have separately looked at. So we have seen that people are slowly but gradually integrating, and they like it more abroad now. At the same time, we can see that people say that the local residents treat them less positive, but irrespective of that, there will be friends in uh, the compared to May 24, the share of Ukrainians with friends among locals have increased from 55 to 63. At the same time, we understand this is not that much. Majority of them abroad, so quite a lot of people are not integrated, and then they don't have local friends. The question is whether Ukrainians are planning to come back. Now we can see the dynamics of replies to this question in the previous several waves. Unfortunately, the share of Ukrainians who are planning that they're coming back, it's actually dropping significantly compared to our previous wave. I mean, it was the first wave, the share of the people that said that they definitely want to return, it's actually fell by more than 20%. Only 26% now are saying that they're planning for sure, and 26% are saying that they're more likely to come back. Those factors that could stimulate Ukrainians to come back, they are the same like in the previous times. This is the end of the war, finishing of military activities in the local region, stopping of air blows, some economic factors like higher level of life and the possibility to find well-paid job. Now we can see that only a small proportion of refugees, 16%, are ready to return to their other regions other than their home region. This is quite negative because unfortunately we see that many regions, many cities are ruined and their restoration may take quite a long time. Nevertheless, there are certain factors that stimulate people to come back not in their home region. And of course, it's about the opportunity to quickly find a well-paid job, free housing, or reduced rent, or free housing provided by their employer. Apart from that, we were asking the people whether they are returning. They also asked about their children. Would their children want to return? And now we can see that 22% of children, 22% of parents say that their children definitely want to return, and 25% would rather return. So we can see that the indicators are even less than among adults. And unfortunately, this lowest wish to come back is the adolescents who can stay abroad even if their parents would return. Dasha, before we make the cluster analysis, we have a comment in the chat. I also wanted to talk about it. When we are looking at the data of November of 2023, this was not the panel data. We were selecting occasional respondents. This is not the same sample. It's not the same refugees that we had in 2022. That is, if, for instance, the absolute figure conditionally has preserved on a stable level, then inside there was a redistribution. Those people who were more prone to come back in 2022, come back to Ukraine, most of them returned. They were replaced by others who have seen some opportunities for themselves or through some objective reasons connected with the war. Therefore, when we are looking at this slide and at the previous slide, which also it had influence on, this has to be taken into account. That doesn't mean that it's the same refugees that we had in 2022, that they were so much disappointed about returning to Ukraine, that this has brought to the change of these figures. That means that this figure of refugees looks more or less the same, but these are the refugees now who are there, who are less prone to come back. Thank you so much for your clarification. This is mentioned in our report. I just wanted to emphasize this. I wanted to make this special note. But otherwise, yes, this has not, this is exactly the change of people who are now. Talking about the cluster analysis, again, we have done using the new data for the cluster analysis. So we now have the fully new data and the new respondents. So we have made absolutely new cluster analysis, and we have also found out 4 groups that look differently versus previous time. The first group has remained plus minus as previously. These are the people from the war zone. So the name stands for itself. These are the people who were forced to leave their homes due to active hostilities or the occupation of the region. Unfortunately, they have suffered most from the war. They have lost housing, health, income, much more than other groups. And now these people, they are much more likely to travel abroad. I mean, 25, 49, they would rather travel abroad with children, and unfortunately, they are less likely to be confident about returning to Ukraine. Only 13.8% definitely plan to return to Ukraine, compared to 26.2% among all refugees, which is quite logical, because unfortunately, there is too much, and there is too often they have nowhere to return to because their settlement was ruined. But that's what the statistics says. The second group, we have called it older people, because this is about most older people, 50 plus years old, most of whom do not have higher education. But with the other indicators, they are probably more or less very similar to an average refugee. The only thing which is really make them different, apart from what I said, they have a better connection with Ukraine. They are returning Ukraine much more often to make a visit. The third group we have called self-sufficient. These are the people who pay for their housing on their own. They don't get social payments. They are more prone to work, both remotely for a Ukrainian company and full-time job in the host country. It's very interesting that this group is more ready to return to Ukraine even before the end of the war, 54.2% compared to 38.7% even before the end of the war. Well, this figure is 38.7% of all respondents. And the last group we have called in the process of integration. These are Ukrainians who are currently in the process of active integration. They are attending language or other short-term courses and are still unemployed. Many of this group live in Germany or some other rich countries who have taken the policy of integration and generous benefits for Ukrainians, where they give a high level of social payments using this integrational money in order to immediately force Ukrainians to find job and to work. So apart from that, we have also looked at the factors which are connected with the wish of Ukrainians to return with the help of the regression analysis. For those who understand regression analysis, we have also the graph that shows odds ratio for each factor. I will not explain you in detail about it. I mean, if this figure is more than 1, this means that this group is more prone to return. If it's less than 1, then this group is less prone to return. But if it crosses 1, that the wish is not really different. In general, we see that women are 55% more likely to seek to return to Ukraine than men. Men may be afraid that they will not be able to travel abroad again or will be punished if they cross the border illegally because they can be conscripted. Also, older people are more likely to return to Ukraine. Less, we see that the students of foreign higher educational institutions, employees or business owners abroad, they are less likely to want to return. And those who are not working but looking for a job. So all of these are less likely to return. That is, they are the ones who already have integrated or who want to integrate. They are less eager to return. If we look at the breakdown of countries, it's very interesting that Ukrainians living in the UK are 87% more likely to want to return than Ukrainians in Germany. Among other countries, there is not that much of a big difference. Also, refugees who left northern, southern, and eastern Ukraine are less likely to want to return to Ukraine than those who left western Ukraine. Once again, this could be connected with the fact that these regions suffered most and destroyed most compared to Western Ukraine, and maybe they don't have anywhere to return to. And the last is that people who have a bigger level of income in Ukraine, they're much less abroad. They're less likely to want to return to Ukraine. If they have a good job, have a good income, they would rather stay abroad rather than come back to Ukraine and search for a job. In the end, we are summarizing our overall evaluations, how many refugees will return, how many will stay, and how this will influence the economy with our existing evaluations. 1.4 to 2.3 million will stay abroad even after the war ends, and still another from 87 to 115,000 of Ukrainians on average may leave. That includes men who are abroad and who can be conscripted. So we have not taken all the Ukrainians because we don't understand how many Ukrainians can want, but knowing whose wives have left and those who would want to reconnect to their families abroad, we have calculated this man. Also talking how this can influence the economy and the geography. On the right, you can see the demographic pyramid that shows the pre-war condition of Ukraine, the distribution of Ukrainian population using the state information, state statistics information. You also see the number of people who are abroad. They are mentioned here as this dotted. We can see that a lot of people have left aged 30, 39. So this could be a big demographic problem as well. And if we talk about the economic losses that we have calculated, that economic losses can continue from 3.9% of the pre-war GDP to 6.3% annually. So that's quite a big figure as well, although they're less than our previous calculations because we have changed the methodology of calculation of Ukrainians abroad. And we can see that this is quite a big figure. And in the end, we are coming back to some recommendations. Our recommendations remain as they were in the previous waves. Unfortunately, they remain actual. We are recommending to cooperate with EU countries in the return of Ukrainians after the war. Ukraine needs to convey to its European partners that helping Ukraine return refugees after the war will be a great support for it. To give assistance to such kind of people, all kinds of assistance. This could be the state-private partnership, when the state, for instance, invests in housing and gives people the housing, and the company invests into workplaces, and we have jobs for the people also, so they could easier find the job. We could do some requalification courses for people who are staying abroad. It's important to continue in communication with them through diplomatic representations, so they would not be fully torn away from Ukraine. And for children, especially when they're coming back, there should be the reintegration into Ukrainian schools and higher education institutions, so it would be easier for them to come back to training and education. And our last recommendation is after the end of this temporary protection, to grant Ukrainian refugees the freedom of movement and choice of residence similar to EU citizens. This will allow refugees to return without fear, and without fear of losing their benefits or the right to reside abroad. That's all. Our main conclusions are here. Allow me to keep this last slide on the screen. But again, if anyone wants to read it, but basically this is all which we wanted to present to you today. Many thanks for your attention. In case there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Dasha, many thanks. The only thing regarding the presentation, sorry, not the presentation, the recommendations. I would like to add that we are also cooperating with our international partners with this question, and to a great extent, we're thinking about various alternative options of how to move to a more flexibility of moving between Ukraine and host country and Ukraine, namely what is called in Ukrainian the circular migration, when people are moving back and forth. Correspondingly, in our report, this recommendation was mentioned regarding the right to permanently reside in the European Union. We have actually placed it on the first place. That also concerns the transportation connection. That is quite important to make sure that this movement between this host country and Ukraine could be simplified as much as possible, and to give the possibility to use those options of employment which are there available in Ukraine. Now, I suggest to move forward in such a way. I have looked up that we have quite a lot of interesting questions in Q&A, but again, we have quite a lot of interesting professionals who have agreed to comment our research and also to have the same opinion with the questions that we have raised. So I have the following proposal. Dasha, please go over that you want to reply in writing, and you can also close this in writing. You can also skip them, and then I will give you we will also give the floor to the professionals with the problems that we have discussed today. Good. Then I suggest to present the ones who are with us today. Allow me to present to you by alphabet, and then I will give the floor in a different order, and I will ask the colleagues to be prepared. So today we have the representative of the State Border Control Service, the Department of the Administrative Support, Andriy. Andriy, thank you for commenting one of the questions in the Q&A. Also, Ella Libanova is the director of the Institute of Demography and Social Research of the National Academy, Social Academy of Ukraine. Ella, I will give you the floor first once I have outlined those who are on the meeting. Daria Marchak, the first deputy of the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine. Daria, I will ask you after Ella to take the floor. Also, we have the regional coordinator from IOM, and Alexander Deriko, the researcher of the agency to give refugee European agencies for asylum, who during the last 7 days have presented their big research related to the ones who were forced to flee because of the war. Ella, I would like to ask you to take the floor. Maybe you can also return the camera. The only thing, you are muted. Yes, we can see you really well. No, everything should work now. Again, the video isn't working. Yeah, now it's good. Now it's good. First of all, colleagues, allow me to greet you. This is a very interesting research, and honestly speaking, there is so much work to make the figures more correct, more exact. Why I don't like the word refugees? Because in reality, our migrants, most of them don't have this status of the refugee. They like to stay this temporary protection status. Exactly, that's why I'm against of the word refugee, only because of that. No other arguments are used. I would honestly like to ask you that we would use this term, which is different from this traditional term, which is refugees. First of all, maybe you can center the phone, if you don't mind. There are a lot of significant mistakes. You say that 13% against the biggest age group. These are small details, but this was done very quickly, but this is a normal situation. First and most important, it's important to work with the data from European statistics. Why we have such a big discrepancy? I will tell you honestly, your figure I love more because it seems to me that it really corresponds more to what reality is. If we look at the cumulative balance of migration, which is given by our border control, we are monitoring this since 24th of February. Every day we have this information collected, so it doesn't come together, the figure that is given by the European statistics, Eurostat. But this Eurostat, we have to look up what is the reason behind it, because I thought it maybe that they're making double counting, but maybe it's about those who don't receive the social protection. If they don't get the social support, that at least Germany, Switzerland, I mean, countries where they take it very seriously, definitely there will be no double counting. Possibly it's in Moldova, in Romania, in some countries which are quite poor. In general, this can't be the case. Part of the people who are in these countries, they don't uh, register this status, and the real figure should actually be bigger than Eurostat gives you. So we have to sort it out why this is the case. I'm not ready to say because I don't know myself. We are working with them, trying to sort it out for 2 years, and somehow it's not moving. What has made it doubt? Too many kids. It's just too much. Regarding the figures that we get from the European statistics, Eurostat, it's much less. It's just more than third. Because with the children, the situation is as follows. If the child has not reached the age when they can go to the kindergarten, maybe that child is not counted. But if a child has to go to kindergarten or school, then the accounting is very much exact. We can't have 50%. So you have to sort it out. What is the case? Why it is like that? Number two, which is interesting to me, when you make this distribution of statistics, I would look once again at the age, because in the various age groups, there are various figures, and we are talking about, in general, the male population. I'm asking, are the kids part of that? Because 30% to me is like too much. Maybe with children, yes. If only adults, then very unlikely. And again, there are huge discrepancy with Eurostat data. From the other hand, we have too low figure for the employed people. I think I have seen it at the Eurostat half a year ago. They gave information for various countries where they're working. Then in Poland, and I think in the Czech Republic, I remember it was 51% of the working ones. In Poland, it's even higher. And these figures that you're giving, they are significantly lower. Again, we have to sort out why this is the case. Possibly they are giving, I mean, in Germany, to work without registration, it's of course a huge doubt, especially such a big figure. So we have to sort it out. Fantastic cluster analysis I have not seen from anyone. That's really your Uh, Good job. We can only envy you that you have done it and we have not. Also, what concerns this high share of people with higher education, to me, it seems like this could be a simple explanation. When they left, it was more city citizens, urban dwellers, when they have higher education status. Of course, relatively young people left when you don't look at the older age group, where the share of the persons with high education would be less. That could explain it. Once again, regarding the plans for return, you know, in general, I'm talking about the absolute figures. I would not do it. I'm talking about the percentage, who's planning, who's not. The question is that today, uh, this will be after the hot phase is over. First of all, is security and safety, then with big gap, housing and work, and then with another big gap, everything else. Regarding recommendations, I would emphasize that it's not possible to have any preferences to this group. We have a huge number of ADPs, and we can't allow that people who are returning from abroad would get something more than the ones who are in the central or the western Ukraine, because otherwise this would be a big question mark. I have not understood what you talked about in the presentation when you said that there is the threat that we would need to return payments. I mean, of course, if the country is not in this country, that this country is giving these payments, then they should return it. This we will not be able to avoid. Also, I don't understand. Maybe I misunderstood, possibly regarding the stay in the European countries for more than 180 days. That's a question. No matter how it be, we are not members of the EU, and problems with with the Polish farmers say that if you don't resolve it in the beginning, then problems start. So to me, it seems like that we should immediately sort this out. Honestly speaking, that's all what I wanted to say. What Once again, let me repeat, when we are talking about the figures regarding the returnees, to me it seems like more promising is the defining the conditions and factors for the return, what we should propose to our military migrants so they would return to Ukraine. That's what I wanted to say. I would like to once again welcome you and greet you with this research. Ella, many thanks. Dasha, the questions that will be during this reports, this feedback you can collect, and then I will give you the floor and maybe you can revert to us. I would like to ask Daria Marchak. This is the first deputy of the Ministry of Social Policy, who is now working at the demographic strategy of Ukraine. And I think this data of the ministry will be very much interesting. They will not be only interesting, I'm using them quite actively today that we had at the event. Many thanks for this research, many thanks for your clarifications, for the detailization, and regarding factors, and regarding groups of people who we have abroad. Welcome, colleagues. I wanted, Ella has passed on to me a bridge saying that we should talk about the conditions to make sure people can return from abroad. I would also like to reflect with several ideas. Number one, I would agree Unfortunately, I'm not the academician like Ella. I can't comment figures, but I can comment our attitude towards these figures. First of all, I think it's a very important topic that the question of the free movement of people between countries, it's the question of our future. We as the country candidate for the EU membership, in any case, may God give us, hopefully in the next few years, we will reach the status of the member of the EU. And this will mean that our citizens will get the right to freely move between borders. That means that already now, factual, that situation that we have at the moment, it is definitely is very tragic from the point of view of the security reasons. I mean, this military aggression and the conditions that we have to live through and those challenges that we have. But when we're talking exactly about the policy related to our migrants abroad, we should understand that based on the figures that you have voiced right now, and regarding the factors why people are planning to return or they're not planning to return, really security and safety is number one. Number two is the conditions of living, the self-sufficiency, economic conditions. Does the person have a job? Is the person competitive at the labor market? Are there any comfortable conditions for life to make sure that the children will go to school? And that means that for us, globally, it's necessary for us as a country, it's important to create conditions under which our internal IDPs and the people who are abroad, that they would choose to live in Ukraine because it's more comfortable here and they would get enough level of financial provision and services on behalf of the state, and the quality of the services and the environment. This will be up to their expectations, and it will be competitive compared to other countries. Therefore, it seems to me that we should need to all of us as the country, and we are mentioning this in the draft economic demographic strategy that we have developed together with the working group. We have fine-tuned it through several iterations, and we will come out to a public discussion. We need to create conditions where people in Ukraine would have the possibility to have high quality individual housing, not necessarily own housing, but individual. They should afford this high quality housing, and this could be done through various programs of support. There are separate programs from the Ministry of Restoration, also the Ministry of Economy. We are also developing our own program to support for the rent of the housing. But the key question remains creating possibilities of the funds of residents so people can live comfortably. The second very important question is the employment. We can see this problem regarding the IDPs. We see that 1.3 million of IDPs at the moment, 1.3 million IDPs who are receiving payments from the state. Out of them, only 530,000 are employed. And that says, in reality, not so much that we have the absence of vacancies. Vice versa, on the contrary, we have quite a surprising, paradoxical situation on the labor market, because on the one hand, we have a lot of unemployed, and on the other hand, we have a lot of vacancies, which is difficult to complete. The National Bank says frankly about the deficit of professionals on the labor market. That means that we have to do a lot of work connected with the retraining of IDPs. And when we're talking about the recommendations that you have mentioned in your report, there is this recommendation about requalification and retraining. In our opinion, it's very important to develop such programs of retraining. If we look at which way other countries, exactly Germany, are integrating into their society, that is exactly most of all through the retraining programs. And that's where the government of Germany is making a lot of emphasis. The third important question, or the third important area which we need to develop in our country, is the issue related to civil infrastructure. This we should do for IDPs and for our citizens who are living in Ukraine, and to make sure people can return. We're talking about a sufficient network of kindergartens, schools with the shelters. It's definitely necessary infrastructure for the service providers for people with handicap, because we have, unfortunately, anecdotically, a lot of cases, they say that it's very comfortable to live in the European country with their child who has a disability, because it's a barrier-free environment, very friendly to a person with a disability. So this comfortable civil infrastructure, it makes a good bridge to a next question, is creation of cities that will be comfortable for living. I would be really interested in the next rounds of your research to see exactly at this component, because we often omit it from our attention, but availability of parks, sports grounds, training lanes for walking, this is something that people talk about as an advantage and an important factor for the comfort in living in other countries. It's exactly coming from our citizens who have left. So this is the human-friendly environment development is very important for our country. Correspondingly, I apologize if I'm being chaotic, but my key takeaway from your presentation would be is supporting of the conclusions that we made during the development of the demographic strategy. It's important for us to create the environment where people would be feeling quite dignified and economically also successful. I would agree to Ella. We can't say that if a person is returning from abroad, we are creating a more preferential condition than people who are living in Ukraine. This is definitely no-go. And this is one figure which Maria Rybko has already shared on Facebook with some link to me. But in my opinion, this figure seems very important for me. Today, we as the country have 4.9 internal displaced people. Out of them, 3.5 million, these are IDPs who moved after the 24th of February 2022. 3.5 million, this is more than the number of our citizens, in accordance with your research today, that are living in other country, and which other partner countries are trying to integrate into their society. And if we were to compare the capacity of Ukraine, which has to integrate on its own to integrate that number of people, and the capacity of other countries who don't have the war and who develop, of course, this capacity is not equal, but Ukraine does really a lot to make sure that this exercise would be done. A lot has been, this work needs to be done, and it has to be something that touches upon all spheres of public policy, which is not focused on repurchase. Sometimes we say that, okay, maybe we can put in more social protection than people, what people are getting abroad. In our opinion, this is very utopical. We can't, we should not have, and it would be destructive to buy somebody to Ukraine. We need to compete by creating conditions, by self-economic sufficiency, comfort of living, good jobs that will allow us, when we become even the EU member, to compete for human capital, for people, and talk about returning of our migrants. And very important other topic, which is also very important, that we have to expand our focus. We're talking about the return. We're talking about the necessity return for the Ukrainian migrants who left after 24th of February. What should we do? What should we do with the people who left earlier? We have a huge Ukrainian diaspora, and we have a huge number of migrants who left on a regular basis, rhythmically every year, even before the full-scale invasion. Therefore, in this exercise, in the analysis, which should be the policy of the country related to migrants, I would expand the focus to migrants in a more widespread option, taking into account those who left even before the full-scale invasion. But again, it seems to me it's a hypothesis that needs to be rechecked, but it's my hypothesis that the number of actions that we should do for the return of these citizens, it will be more or less the same when it comes to migrants who left over the last 2 years compared to the ones who left before. Apologize if I have stopped too much and too chaotic. Many thanks for your research, and I will look forward to receiving new updates. Many thanks, Daria. I would be very much thankful to you if you look up at several questions which are addressed to you in Q&A. Maybe you can reply to some of them. Now, we have received 2 comments, some strategic comments related to our research. And now we would like to go away once again to questions of data. And first, I would like to ask the floor Andriy Ivansky, who is representing the State Border Control Service. And after that, I will pass the floor to our international colleagues, who I'm sure are very much interested also to listen to what we are discussing and what we are thinking. And I'm sure that they will have their own questions related to data. Many thanks for joining. The first question that we had in the presentation. And Ella has, there is a lot of uncertainty related to the data. It seems like this data is less important from the point of view of the state policy, because we have to understand who is actually a refugee, which are the recommendations, how to engage them to Ukraine. And also for the state policy, it's important knowing what it could be about returning or not returning to the Ukrainian economy. What is your vision looking at the discrepancies that we have? Looking at the people are using this data, take into account how to do this correctly. Good evening, colleagues. Many thanks for the invitation. Many thanks for joining to hear the opinions. I would support Ella that it's not very correct to have this research to use temporary protection and refugee, because temporary protection is aimed at the directive connected to Yugoslavia, and also the convention about refugees foresees other status. This is the advice that this temporary protection and the research that you have been using from the website of Eurostat, it especially concerns the citizens of Ukraine who left from Ukraine. That would fix in the register. And they are supplied this 4.3 million. In order to understand the discrepancies, what concerns the crossing of the border, we are fixing the number of exits and entrances through the border control for Ukrainian citizens and for foreigners. It would not be very much representative to use the mathematical difference, how many entered and how many people exited, because we are not collecting that volume of information, which we are not processing the excessive amount of information which is personal about the person, why this person is coming, on which basis, to which term, where they would live. We are only collecting information about the citizenship, number of passport, in and out. Therefore, these questions also require additional studying, that this pure mathematical difference, who has left and who has returned. So we would use it in the research, both for the evaluation, because if we take the analytics of 2020, 2021, 22, then the average yearly indicators related to crossing of the border in and out, they fluctuate between 35, 38 million persons in and out on average per year. And if we take the citizens of Ukraine over the last year, entered and exited, Ukrainians, there was equal number, more or less more than 15 million, 15.2 million entered and 15.3 exited. But again, if we compare with years before the full-scale invasion, 2020, 2019, it was also quite a lot of significant limitations for the entrance when Europe was closing, the whole world was closing. So it was also a question mark what concerned in and out. The other part which concerns the statistical accounting and certain discrepancies in this accounting data compared to our data with the border control guys of the neighboring countries. It says that each country, the border control of the European Union, they're using overall approaches when it comes to the Schengen Code about crossing the borders. And in some questions, they are different from our legislation in a way of some accounting data, statistical data, just for you to understand. For instance, if we have, for instance, somebody is leaving Ukraine, be it Ukrainian or foreigner, to Poland, we account for such a person that he has left. He has crossed the border and went abroad. Polish, for certain reasons, this Ukrainian or foreigner was not allowed to Poland. Maybe he exceeded the term of stay, absence of visa. I mean, that's a sovereign right of the country to limit the movement in the framework of the control of the immigration situation. So this person is coming back. We are accounting this information that, I mean, we will be canceling the information that he crossed the border. But the Polish was the very same situation. They're making a different accounting. They put it as he entered and then he left, exited. Same concerns the border control guys of Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, or Moldova regarding this statistical data accounting. But in order for us to understand the overall, as far as I'm concerned, in order to understand the overall statistical evaluation of the number of citizens, as Ms. Deputy Minister said, we should not forget about those citizens of Ukraine who, in one way or the other, have legalized before the full-scale invasion when they are in the European Union countries. That's about residence, legalization, family status, reunion, family reunion, and the like. And most importantly, also, it's important to take into account the point that the Ukrainian passport, it gives the right for the visa-free entrance to the European countries. And if there are not any limitations, even before the full-scale invasion, Ukrainians could freely cross the border and visit the countries of the European Union, sometimes several crossings if we're talking about the dwellers of the bordering western regions of Ukraine, this is again, this was even employment abroad in the European countries, just staying over the weekend. Or it all depended on the situation, which was connected with one or the other season of the year. Now, take into account that the question is very much in the air about crossing the border. It's mostly about women with children, because for the category of men 1865, we have serious limitations for crossing the border. So we can say that these persons are crossing the border and they're citizens of Ukraine. And the statistical indicators, we can't say that they exited or they returned. This could be the same person who has been crossing it for 10 times, somebody maybe for 20 times, maybe somebody is crossing only once. Therefore, some comments like that, which pertain to these statistical samples. Maybe for a wider picture in the research, it would be important because the website of Eurostat is quite informative. You can also search for certain statistical data related to Ukrainian citizens, not only related to the temporary protection, but also what concerns residents staying for other reasons in there. Andriy, many thanks. We have two clarifications. We can't help using your presence when you have been working with data. These questions arose. First of all, before clarification, we actually wanted to thank you that the state border control throughout all of our project, no matter how we have been doing it, it has always been very helpful in terms of assisting us and gave us all the data which we have requested in various periods to help us with the research. Did you make, first question, did you make your own analysis why we have such a big discrepancy with the UN data that they are providing? Is this UNHCR data? And if you have not done it, okay, fine. And the second question, we have noticed that a lot of people are exiting exactly to Romania and they're not returning. Exactly in this country, we have this huge disbalance. Are there any concrete explanations that could be voiced by you using your experience? Thank you for your question. What concerns this sample with the UNHCR? You mean UNHCR, right? Yes, yes. See, we are operating statistical data which are entered into the information system, processed, adjusted, and we're working with very dry figures. Apologies for such a comparison. This is the data that we have. Which methodology was used by the UNHCR? Maybe they were based on some demographic analysis when it comes to a number of persons, women and children, who fall into these most risky categories that will be exiting from Ukraine into the European Union, hiding from massive Russian attacks, massive violation of international law when it comes to military conflicts. So something like that. Because once again, let me emphasize that the international legislation, it clearly separates the reasons for getting the status of a refugee and this basis for the receipt of this temporary protection status. Possibly, in my opinion, why this discrepancy is because the field offices that were deployed in the first months of the full-scale invasion in the countries of neighboring countries, they, knowing that a lot of UNHCR colleagues helped with their first assistance, maybe they were making some research, some surveys, and for the overwhelming majority, the research, people said that the Ukrainian refugees, but for the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians who are forced to be outside of Ukraine, for them it's most important is security, safety, and some regularity. So for them, these peculiarities of this international legislation, whether it's refugees or if it's temporary protection, it's not important for them, for their actual reply. So maybe that's why UNHCR has such kind of figures. When it comes to the other question regarding the number of cases to Romania, we are not seeing such big departures. It is actually at the level of previous year. For instance, it's the overall number of people, slightly more than 5 million of people left in the direction of Romania, 2.4 in, 2.6 out. They are more or less at the level of last year. Possibly this is connected to a certain extent with the fact, I don't know which period you have taken for your research, but this could be connected with the fact that last year the situation at the Polish border connected with this sometimes lowering, sometimes increasing blockade by farmers. So there could be an explanation that, of course, Poland has the biggest distance of the border, big passage points, but Poland has really helped a lot, and they did a lot of help 2 years ago. But now, when it comes to Romania, we don't see any extra uncharacteristic increase or decrease. Maybe it's connected with the fact that some statistical data are formed, which are not properly sampled or taken from the European statistics. I think Romania is number three, number four, number five in terms of the number of citizens of Ukraine who have received this temporary protection. Many thanks, Andriy. And now let me pass on to our international colleagues. First of all, I would like to ask Milan, who is representing IOM. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving this opportunity to International Organization for Migration to present some findings, some important findings concerning the possible and the actual returns to Ukraine. In support of what Mrs. Marchako mentioned and Mr. Ivansky from the border police concerning the crossings between the neighboring countries and Ukraine, I would like to take your attention with a few very recent findings. I will try to share my screen. I hope you see. You see? Do you? Okay, well, only a few minutes. What you see, I start with the main findings of our latest assessment within Ukraine, the general population survey. The estimated number of returnees from abroad. They are about 1.1 million, a bit more than 1.1 million people, and they represent about 26% of the returnees from abroad and the returnees from internal displacement. When we talk about the reasons, some interesting finding is the fact that, well, amongst the top three reasons is to return back to Ukraine from abroad is to move closer to the family and the friends, the improved security in the region of return, as well as the better opportunities to earn money, to find work. The average time spent in displacement abroad is about 6 months, 181 days. And here you can also see the top three of the countries of displacement. After this data, I would like to share a few words on the countries where the most part of the returnees come from. The top three are Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic. Once they return to Ukraine, they need about the top needs are financial support, power blanks and generators, fuel for heating, especially in the winter conditions. Besides the general population survey that we do in Ukraine, I would like to spend one more minute on some findings on the survey that we do with Ukrainians crossing back to Ukraine from the neighboring countries. In both surveys, we have very similar gender disaggregation. When we talk about the general population survey in Ukraine and the crossings back to Ukraine, which is done at border crossing points, we have about 89 to 90% of the respondents are women, and about 10-11% on average are men. Approximately the half of the respondents are coming back for a short visit for up to 30 days, and the other half declare that they envisage a longer term stay, potential return, or they have not decided yet. And we have a sample about 28,000 people in 6 countries, 5 neighboring countries. And we also deploy this survey in Latvia, where we talk to Ukrainians that are transiting through the Russian Federation territory to reach the regions not controlled currently by the government. The main regions. One word on the destination of the returnees and the ones who cross back for either long or short term. 90%, 89 to 90% declare that they go to the regions of origin, and 1/10 of the respondents, the ones who do not go to the regions of origin, do not go there either because the property is ruined, destroyed, or the family has moved elsewhere. And really, the needs at the crossing back to Ukraine are the half of the sample that we talk to declare no particular needs, and from the other half, the leading needs are financial support or medication or support for medical treatment. About 60% of the Ukrainian nationals that we have surveyed upon crossings back from abroad have stayed in the neighboring countries. They only moved to one of the 5 neighboring countries, the 6, sorry, including Latvia. And the rest, 6% were in Germany, 5% are coming from Bulgaria, and 3% are coming from the Czech Republic. The rest of the sample are small fractions dispersed all over Europe or in other countries. Mm. Well, the very last finding that I would like to present to you is that the top three reasons to cross back to Ukraine, either for a long-term or for short-term visit, is to meet with the family, to reunite with the family, or to go to doctor medical treatment. Basically, these are the latest sets of our findings when we discuss either a return or crossing back for a certain time of a visit. As a conclusion, I'd like to mention that the main reason that the main amongst the main reasons that the returnees within Ukraine interviewed within the Ukraine is either the improved security situation or the better job opportunities or a combination of both. Some little fractions mentioned that medical treatment, schooling for the children is better placed in Ukraine than based on their experiences in a foreign country environment. And this is it on my side. I will stop here, open for the questions, if any.
Colleagues, please take into account that the IOM data are also available in chat. The Milan's colleague has put us this data. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you for your invitation, and I would like to thank the author for the presentation, which was extremely interesting and informative, as well as the previous speakers for the interventions. Also, I am a bit mindful of the time. I just would like to clarify that I'm here today only representing myself as an author of the report rather than the organization per se. But I think it was very interesting, the presentation that I heard, because there were many points in common with the analysis that we have performed and released recently. However, I would like to maybe focus on two aspects that I found particularly interesting so far, which are the following. In one of the during one part of the presentation, there was a very interesting focus on the integration of beneficiaries of temporary protection in the EU plus countries. And one very interesting element that was presented in the slides was a somehow relatively general improvement of economic conditions of individuals that have been passed some time already in the EU plus between the initial phases of the displacement till today, which we could all agree that is, despite being a temporary condition and particularly difficult, is still a positive development for those. Now, I wanted to ask maybe a couple of questions on this. And one was related to the composition of the sample. Do you think, I mean, to the others in general, do you think that there might be a connection between how the sample is composed to the type of economic, effect that were perceived by those in terms of economic improvements. And I mentioned this specifically because in our report, in the Voices report, we have noticed that our respondents were particularly with high level with high education level, even higher than the average of let's say than the average in Ukraine. So that could be, for instance, an effect of some sampling mechanism that we have encountered during our data collection procedure that we had to account in our reporting. And the second question was if you were able perhaps to elaborate a little bit on the drivers of this economic development, of an economic improvement in the EU. Is it an effect of better stable or non-stable economic opportunities? Do you have other effects at play? For instance, one element that we have noted in our research was the effect that, especially maybe during the first phases, but there were still some effects nowadays, that economic remittances from Ukraine had on displaced individuals in the UK, in the EU. And the last point, and I mentioned last point on this, would like to have maybe if you could elaborate or if you had any additional information on the conditions for those who have not improved their economic situation in the UK. What mechanisms are at play for them? No, for instance, one of the key elements that we have understood from our research was that there are specific barriers to economic employment at play for those who are residing now, specific hurdles for those to get stable employments in the EU. And among the most mentioned ones, there were for sure basic elements such as the knowledge of the local language, which was a very key driver at play, or the mismatch between the skills that the individual was bringing with him from Ukraine and the offer from the labor market in the host country. And a third one, very relevant one, even perhaps connected to the nature of our sample, was the education opportunities for children, and particularly for infants. So the lack of or the barriers to access early childhood education opportunities for individuals in the EU was a significant barrier mentioned to those who were residing in the EU for getting stable or temporary jobs and improve their economic conditions. Now, I would be very quick in mentioning perhaps a second element, if I may, and it's connected to return intentions. It's a very interesting topic. I understand it's also very interesting from both sides, in Ukraine and the EU. And maybe just a couple of considerations that we made based on our research. I think that we are on very similar lines in understanding the reasons why individuals want or do not want to get back to return to Ukraine. We have understood from our report how the decision-making process of individuals leading them to decide whether to return or not is a very dynamic, and very different elements are at play over time. And some of them are very in line with what you have presented. So for instance, the state in the integration process in the EU, which is really important. So whether individuals have or do not have economic options and opportunities in the futures, where they are resident in the EU, which have somehow a role in their decisions. So for instance, individuals who were residing far away from Ukraine, and especially in Scandinavia, are more likely to decide to remain in the EU, rather than the ones in the neighboring countries. And of course, the residency in the previous residency in Ukraine. for obvious reasons, of course. However, maybe one element that is also very interesting to point out, sorry, two more. One additional element is the type of family unit that individuals have in the EU. So those who report having the entire family household in the EU are more likely prone to express not an intention to return to Ukraine. Okay, here we should dig a bit better and perhaps produce additional research to understand what are the mechanisms at play. But this was an important factor in our research. And lastly, I come to this, which is connected to one of the general discussion points you had so far, which is the legal status of individuals. So yes, we all know how the temporary protection has been extended until March 2025. There is uncertainty about how things will develop, and this uncertainty emerged as an element affecting decision making of individuals in Europe. So the fact of having a provisional legal status in the EU, the fact of not having certainty of for a midterm perspective was a factor at play, mostly hindering investments in integration in the European Union, and therefore protracting states of limbo, we could say. So states of not knowing what would be at play in the mid and long term. I would like to thank you for your time and listening me, and I would like to stop here and open the floor.
Dasha, I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank to all other participants of today's discussion who have been so polite to reply. We have answers to some 21 questions online as text. That's the best in our history. We have to do something new. So on our webpage of this project, we will preserve these replays, and we will keep them for those who would want to get additional information. So, okay, so what we have in terms of what you wanted to comment from the issues that were posed by colleagues during the discussion. And at this, we should be finishing because we have gone over time, but yes, the topic is quite extensive. Many thanks for your comments and for the additional information. This has been also very interesting. Very quickly about certain points which I have recollected and which I wanted to reply. First of all, regarding the data of Eurostat, that's really a good source of data. We have been using it to evaluate in which countries Ukrainians are. And we have also the dynamics when we see, like in Germany, more people are than in Poland. As I said before, it seems to me that they have this double accounting, but that it also depends a lot on the country. Really, in Germany, this could be less people than that because people are getting social payments and it's just very much controlled, versus Italy, where almost nobody is getting the social payments. So in these countries, people can return and people will not see that, will not feel that, because this extension of this temporary status is done automatically. You don't even have to apply a new. Also, from the latest questions, I would want to say, from the point of view of improving the economic status of Ukrainians, this could actually take place at the expense of changes in the composition of sample, because people who had less luck to find a good job, they have less luck in terms of staying and integrating, so they have more chances to return. And again, there was a question whether they get this assistance from the relatives in Ukraine. This was the question in our research, and from the latest research, 52% are giving their relatives assistance and 9% is receiving such an assistance. from relatives in Ukraine. And in the previous waves, this was much more receiving from relatives. So we now can see that people they have integrated, and they have fully are self-dependent. I'd like to thank once again regarding all the comments to presentation. We will take into account all your adjustments. I guess that's all which I wanted to quickly come back with. In case there are any specific questions, I would be very happy to reply in writing by email. In case there are any remarks and suggestions, we will be very happy to receive that. Many thanks, Dasha. I'm also writing this down for our minutes to our communication team, everybody who has registered for today's event. We had more than 240 participants who have physically were present. So we will email to you the whole package of materials as soon as they are uploaded, or the link to such a package, because as was mentioned before, we will have the full data set with this survey to make sure those who are analyzing this data independently can dig something new, maybe create another segmentation or try to rebuild the previous segmentation. Possibly somebody can use this data in their academic work or in training. In case you have some interesting results, we would be very happy if you could share with us, and maybe we can organize another presentation. Also, we will have the video of this event, and there will be a question related to Q&A. Many thanks to everybody who has participated in our today's discussion. Many thanks, Dasha, for the great work, which we have quickly done. And thanks to hackers who have put Kyivstar down. We wanted to make this project still on time, and as soon as possible to provide this data to those who need it in their work and in some other objectives. Again, many thanks to everybody. Wish everybody quiet evening, and let us meet at our next events. Many thanks. Goodbye.